This audio presentation of a likely story by Samuel Bousky is brought to you by Giving Voice to the Wisdom of the Ages, copyright 2020, all rights reserved. Within creativity itself, creation conceived the extent of heavens and the extent of earth. Genesis 1:1. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Shakespeare from Hamlet. This book is affectionately dedicated in fond memory of Neville Goddard. It was his teaching and his friendship that stimulated my research into spiritual principles that have rent the veil from my inner vision to see afar. Introduction. The title for this book has been selected with care and intent. Depending upon how you enunciate its three words, you may infer the story to be definitely valid, highly improbable, or absolutely ridiculous. No matter what the implication of your expression, you will find this story to be of interest, one that is feasible, intriguing, and, though seemingly somewhat unrealistic, even quite possibly valid. This story, while intentionally written to be brief, has been assembled from very ancient historical data, together with currently available records. Contained information is derived from archaeology, paleontology, osteology, history, legends, esoteric evaluations of original religious records. Conclusive technical data is available to the effect that mankind existed on this planet for thousands of years and perhaps well over 100,000, and surprisingly enough, there is no conflict with this fact in our authentic Bible scriptures. Someone once declared that our English Bible was the Word of God, so who then would dare challenge its authenticity? Yet long before Christ came onto the scene, an Egyptian pharaoh, Ptolemy Philadelphus, or Ptolemy II, king of Egypt, commissioned Hebraic scholars to make a Greek translation of their Torah Bible for his library in Alexandria. These scholars knew very well that their Torah had been cleverly written with several distinct levels of understanding. They also felt honor bound to protect the most sacred, understandable levels of these holy scriptures. Since he had been commissioned by the Pharaoh to make a translation, they did so, but as a resourceful ploy it was made only of the outer level, so as to maintain protectiveness of its most sacred elements. Historian Flavius went along with this ploy to cover the real reason with judicious comments on its title. The Latin Vulgate version was made by St. Jerome from this first translation. Thus the pattern of translational limitation became permanently set. Even though St. Augustine, then a Roman Catholic bishop, in comparison with the Hebrew, reported translation variants with Vulgate, his disclosure was ignored. It is close to 400 years since the King James English translation became available. Here again the identical translational pattern was repeated, and now exists in various versions of all of our English Bible text. The original Bible text is written in the most amazing language ever formulated. Within its every word and phrase there exist several simultaneous and distinct levels of fact and meaning. Some merely narrations, while others laden with sacred and wholly inviolable divine principles and truth. In examining its history of translation, the first one from original Hebrew to Greek, performed under royal command by pious religious scholars endeavoring to protect its sacredness, a pattern of limitation was set which still survives within all present English texts. It makes one wonder how many Christians now living, or whether perhaps even a single one, may have an understanding of the real depth of meaning of what has so often been labeled as the Word of God. Super people. Long, long ago, so far back in time that there's no one any more that can remember, even long before the present nations now existing on this earth, there lived a highly evolved human race in their society. These people were very notably developed in their intelligence, in their science and technology, and also in their spiritual capability. We have no direct written records of these ancient people, but stories and legends persist abundantly among Hawaiians, Maoris, Hopi Indians, Australian Aborigine, and other races. These tend toward a firm conviction that an ancient existence of just a race of people did indeed inhabit this earth. Modern archaeologists and paleontologists have unearthed a great deal of evidence that points to a very ancient people dating back tens of thousands of years, even thousands of years prior to that which our Bible seems to intimate as the beginning of our present human race. Human skulls dating back about 25,000 years have been found in Australia. Australian Aborigines within their Dreamtime memorials claim to trace back to a culture some 40,000 years ago. This ancient race of mankind must not be confused as having been a primitive culture. The people were eminently developed in many ways exceeding our present culture. even surpassing in many respects our present capabilities, science, and knowledge. They understood the inner framework of physical matter, chemical and molecular structure. Process of life and living were also well known. These ancient people recognized and employed their extended intelligence capability for an interaction directly with the spiritual. Far beyond our present conceptions, they were thus able to induce changes straightway into physical materials. This ancient race began from a state of cultural infancy, just about as ours is proceeding now. They progressed to their elevated state of culture over a time period of some 25,000 years or more, while in our time we have progressed barely about 6,000 years thus far. Archaeological records of ancient stone tablets and writings indicate their land title as Mu. Since the past 100 years or so, it has also been known additionally as Lemuria. Archaeologist David Childress relates how the name Lemuria comes to be. A likable little animal which is sort of a cross between a monkey and a squirrel, and called lemur, is found to occupy the Comoro Islands, also Africa, India, and Malay Peninsula. Along this strip were thought to have been a land bridge remnant of a sunken continent. Zoologist Philip Scatler then suggested the land bridge be named Lemuria after the little lemur animal. Ancient Mu Lemuria was a large continent in what is now the Pacific Ocean. Its area was 8 or 10 times that of the continental United States. Population of that people ran into many millions. The continent of Mu stretched eastward past what is now Africa, India, Philippines, Hawaii, parts of America, and all of Australia. Many stone tablets, carvings, and a bronze figure found in Mexico and evaluated by Churchward tell an intriguing story of this early advanced civilization having a spiritual, monotheistic religion in the land of Mu, that he also called the motherland. World disaster. At a time when stable living was well established in the ancient civilization, a momentous disaster struck the world. An extremely large asteroid lit up all the heaven and then collided with our Earth. Its impact was so tremendous that it shook up the entire world. Devastation occurred in all living things. All living human, animal, and vegetable life was almost entirely destroyed. Earth surfaces cracked. Oceans spilled out to cover most land masses. Entire portions of continents were shifted. Some land areas sank completely. Others rose to new Earth surfaces. Countless volcanoes erupted, spewing fire, ash, and debris into the atmosphere. All over the globe, powerful cyclones stirred up the air, thoroughly spreading volcanic effluent throughout to cut off practically all the sunlight. Shock of the asteroid impact upon Earth initiated an earthquake melee with a long continuing sequence of violent aftershocks. Position of the Earth in its orbit was slightly altered, increasing the number of days in the Earth by over 5 from 360 to 365 and a quarter. The Earth's surface was darkened for what would amount to many months. Vegetation not destroyed by volcanic and cyclonic action perished from loss of sunlight and water. A large proportion of living fish, animals, birds, and human beings were lost during this time of darkness and water resettlement interval. The return of illumination and cessation of earthquakes presented a new map face of Earth's surface. The Mu continent was gone, sunken below what is now the Pacific Ocean. Left were only a few island protrusions. All of this occurred many years ago, long before our present civilization on this Earth came into being. Most people of the Mu civilization did not survive the Earth disaster of that time. Of the millions then alive, an extremely high percentage were completely wiped out. Those few remaining were ones who had even higher spiritual capabilities than the norm. They had been able to foresee the calamity about to befall the Earth and all its population. These few spiritually upper class, so to speak, had very highly developed prophetic and intuitive capabilities. Groups of these remnants traveled by boat and foot across the new face of the Earth to find fresh living areas. Some of these found their way into many islands in the Pacific, into areas of Indonesia and Hawaii, and across a land bridge into what is now the general regions of India and the area of Tibet. But a mainstay of the most highly elevated spiritual ones, who were in search of a more central location on the face of the Earth, settled in the equatorial region of the Nile Valley of Egypt. These new Egyptian settlers recognized that progress for humanity had reverted back to about where they were started some thousands of years prior. All of their writings of nature and science had been lost during the tremendous Earth disaster. Knowledge that remained resided only in the memories. From these memories was a new world progress to arise. Influx of these highly developed spiritual remnants of Mu made an indelible mark in their newly adapted home country. History even relates of Egypt that rather suddenly it changed from a state of polytheism to one of monotheism. In the retained memories of the newcomers were also wisdom. With this wisdom was to come a reawakened human progress out of their past capability to form again a fertile foundation for mankind on this earth. The beginning. A tiny remnant remained of those who inhabited Egypt before the world disaster. The few surviving arrivals from annihilated continent of Mu set up a habitation of their own nearby. These separate areas were known as the Upper and Lower Nile countries. Under progressive influence from those from Mu, they merged in time into becoming the unified country of Egypt. It was then afterward that all Egypt abruptly changed from polytheism to a monotheism culture. A very high intellectual order in those first arrivals from Mu seems to be indicated by a few preserved ancient Egyptian mummies that have skull shapes with elongation to back their head. Loss of the cultural civilization of Mu with all its recorded knowledge and science weighed heavily on the minds and hearts of the new settlers in Egypt. For a redevelopment of their lost sciences pertaining to life, intelligence, and divinity, they could foresee it taking several thousand years. They desired to help this coming culture somehow, while those with understanding were still alive within their people. Plans were then being launched to leave a permanent record of essential parts of their knowledge in a way capable of withstanding the ravage of time, weather, and people, for the several thousand years necessary until the coming new culture could develop their own capability to interpret what had been left for them. Obviously, written words would be quite inadequate in that the current hieroglyphically based language of words and symbols might in itself be a formidable obstacle. A technique was needed to present essential elements of knowledge without the use of language. An ingenious concept emerged. Information would be stored as a numerical data in significant numbers and measurements within structures able to withstand the necessary 5,000 years or more. Also included would be a sculpture-like image to represent within mankind the basic transformation during its involvement. There was much to be accomplished before this plan of permanent data storage would be effected. Sources for structural materials would need investigation. Transportation means would need development. Plans and schedules for detailed component regions would need establishing. A workforce has to be arranged. More immediately critical is a requirement that new revised Earth orbital data on that which changed the past 360 days per year to 365 and a quarter was needed to encode the measurements into the planned structure. To obtain new orbital data without modern optical devices, an Earth location superior to the equatorial Nile was needed. The selected site was as now Stonehenge in England. Many repeated measurements of angular sunrise position over a lengthy period yielded the precision of new data that was needed. In present-day Egypt, in the Giza region, just west of Cairo, stands the Pyramid of Khufu. Its completion has been reckoned at just about 4,800 years ago. The dates of its planning and structural beginning are not known. It is considered to be one of the wonders of the present world. Nearby are 2 large pyramids and 7 smaller ones. Khufu Pyramid sets on a square stone base, 755.5 feet on a side, and covers a ground area of just over 13 acres. Its present height is 451 feet, having lost an additional 30 feet of capstone long ago. The original height was thus 481 feet. Interior stones are mainly granite. From over 2 million exterior limestone-facing plates, about 100,000 were lost in past years. The Khufu Pyramid is a massive structure of immense dimensions. It is quite difficult to appreciate its immensity without standing right before its vastness. It appears truly to be a man-made mountain. Single interior stones are estimated to weigh from 2.5 tons to 70 tons. Total volume of stone is estimated as more than 90 million cubic feet and weighed about 6 million tons. The pyramid covers an area of over 13 acres. Yet in spite of its immensity, it had been constructed with exceptional geometric accuracy. Twice its base perimeter exactly equals 1 minute of latitude at the equator. Side-facing stones of 16 tons have edges cut to accuracies of 10 millionths of an inch over lengths of up to 75 feet. Shape and accuracy are combined to contain specific knowledge in areas of mathematics, geometry, spirituality, and prophecy. Measurements made in terms of a covert unit, called a pyramid inch, yield numerous precise factors. For instance, length of the base divided by the pyramid inch factor yields exactly the number of days in the year as 365.242, within an accuracy of 0.0001%. If the pyramid height is multiplied by 2 pi, 2 times 3.1416, the result yields the number of days in a century. The 76-degree angle at a pyramid crest is related with major forces in mankind dealing with spirit, intellect, life, and matter. Its 4 sides are oriented exactly north, east, south, and west. They also represent the 4 worlds of Judaic mysticism. The natural growth factor in nature, known as the golden section, 1.618034, introduced by Fibonacci circa 1200 AD, is found in the pyramid dimension, as well as the value of constant pi, introduced by Ludolf von Salen circa 1600 AD. These factors were known to pyramid builders long before having been introduced to our present mathematical culture. A vast amount of study of pyramid dimensions has already been made, and there is yet more to learn. External, yet nearly to the Khufu pyramid, is another symbol that has stimulated a great deal of interest. It is a monster-like figure that has acquired the name of Sphinx, probably from Greek mythology. It is a recumbent animal-like figure having the body of a lion, feet of a bull, wings of an eagle, with head and face of a person. It is a mystical symbol of the spiritual evolvement stages of mankind. Strangely enough, it is also a representation of what Ezekiel saw in a vision circa 600 BC, which he describes in the Bible scripture. The modern tarot likens the figures to astrological personality types of the zodiac. Sign: Taurus is the bull, Leo the lion, Scorpio the eagle, and Aquarius the man. As you read on, you may find a similarity of the first 3 as levels of spiritual progress. The ancient pyramid builders seem to have known of the sequence of symbolic forms and left it as just such an identification for us to witness when we have attained the capability to do so. A living drama. You may have heard expressions like eternal life or to live forever, and may or may not have considered what, if anything, they may imply. Is there truly a possibility that a human being can really not die and actually live forever? Living in this world of dense materiality, it is quite natural that we should relate everything in terms of this to our physical world. We know that people get old and die. Then we no longer think of what remains as that of a person, but only as a body. The person is no longer in the body. Life has gone with the person. Imagine that. All the time we had known that person, we had identified him as just the body. What is actually the person within us has no density. We cannot physically touch it or feel it with fingers, or see it in a mirror. It has no weight. It is spirit. We are here as spirit to have life for living in this dense world, so that spirit may grow to maturity. At maturity, we may then be eligible for eternal life. Even before the world disaster, many past-moved people already had reached spiritual maturity. Those then living in the spiritual realm closely observed the construction of the pyramid repository. Compassion for those of the new generation produced a strong desire to provide an even greater assistance toward their spiritual attainment. An amazing scheme was conceived by those beings of high spiritual attainment then living in the heavenly realms, to assist earth people of the new generation toward spiritual growth. Their scheme was put into effect at about the time of Khufu pyramid completion. The highly ingenious scheme would accomplish in an actual display of a living drama, basic stages through which definite spiritual growth does occur. The plan was to employ advanced spiritual souls, or the heavenly realms, who would voluntarily re-enter into physical life again, for the specific purpose of demonstrating those stages required for spiritual growth. The total plan would require about 2,000 Earth years to complete. This would be a reasonably short duration for such actual attainment. The first volunteer entered life in the land of Uz. This in itself is quite a giveaway. The word Uz has the meaning of divine radiance, which represents the quality of the plan initiator. His name was given as Avram. Later it became Abram in English, and then Abraham. He came into life to demonstrate the very first level requirement within consciousness, that of faith. In English, this might better be indicated as an unrestricted inner confidence, or as trust in the spirituality we all possess. This first level is also considered as entering the kingdom. Avram is told he is to become the father of a great nation. Here the word great means more of quality than of quantity. Avram's nation to be will also be the safeguard and keeper of this spiritual procedure. The name Avram itself has a meaning as initiator of outstanding elevated development. Esoteric significance of having a son is an indication of a development from within, an outgrowth. A good many years pass by before Avram attains a spiritual capability for having this development from within. His first such attempt became an ignorant blunder yielding an outgrowth or son called Ishmael, meaning deceptive divine response, not the real thing. Just as our initial spiritual growth attempts influenced by deeply embedded physical drives, that lack of mature spirituality can lead to a total enslavement. As the ingenious plan begins to unfold for disclosing the oncoming humans, the possible pitfalls and specific progressive path towards spiritual eternity, further volunteers enter the stage of this remarkable drama. A purpose of showing oncoming humans a possibility of blundering toward first-level attainment, such as that of Avram in deriving son Ishmael, is to indicate that ignorance can jeopardize growth by blundering. You will soon recognize in this drama that wherever there are two brothers or sons, the firstborn is not the one carrying forth the torch of spirituality. That is, our initial feelings towards spirituality seldom result first off in wholesome spiritual growth. Time passes. Avram at age 100 has a second son. The number 100 signifies divine drive. This second son is another volunteer called Isaac, meaning to verify growth, misconstrued as laughter or derision. The second son confirms that Avram's spirit has grown, has completed the first level, and from his development is now to arrive the second level. Demonstration within this volunteer drama is that a desired spiritual growth initially, without some inner capability, can lead into limitation, self-entrapment, or bondage. Hence, son number 2 is the productive one for progress. Rightly, son number 2 becomes the level 2, which is that of sensing or feeling the inner power of spirituality. The volunteer drama progresses. Son number 2, now as level 2 of spiritual growth, also has outgrowth again as two sons, from the latter of which develops level 3. The second son, as level 3, divides into 12 specific stages of qualities. The volunteer for level 3 is called Jacob in English. It is he who fathers 12 sons and a daughter by 4 separate mothers, 2 slaves and 2 free. In popular terms, level 3 seems to be considered as though representing the 12 astrological signs of the zodiac. Such relationship is not fully warranted. The 12 distinctions, whether sons or signs, are stages within consciousness, nuances of spiritual change or growth. The 12 are more likely 14, since one more represents level completion and another one more is for elevation to a still higher level. The 12 stages are not exactly distinct or explicit. They gradually change and merge into their neighbor at the next higher stage. They are qualities in a state of change or growth within consciousness. With adequate growth, the person entering life at a given stage may advance or grow into a next higher or several higher stages. If you advance spiritually, your astrological sign at birth will differ at your end of days. It is a bit similar to your matriculation in grade school. You had to go through 12 grade stages to get 13, your diploma. At that stage, you become eligible, 14, for a college continuation. To make living spiritual growth seem more complex, but really entirely natural, there are also 12 stages within each of the 3 levels discussed so far. Thus, total spiritual growth needs experiencing of 3 times 12 as 36 stages, or 3 times 14 as 42, to graduate from level 3. It is mainly during level 3 wherein changes in growth seem to be more difficult and can make one feel more distraught. Our process of spiritual growth may seem somewhat like what Britain did to their undesirables a couple of 100 years ago. They were all shipped way off to Australia, where there was practically nothing but Aboriginal natives, and where each one had to learn how to become a decent citizen mainly by observation of the faults of his miserable companions. And so it is with us. We have no real teachers, only that of experience to witness the faults and difficulties of others, of whom we may learn possible advancement. When a Jacob-type soul, level 3, seeks advancement through the loving marriage, its immaturity may force a marriage of limitation that its own 12-stage initial spiritual pattern does not desire. As it may be with us also from innate immaturity, the path we may pick through the first 4 stages, as seeming development, may be without benefit of soul impress or desire. A slight pattern change then may occur, symbolized by a level 3 soul bearing 4 more advancements in turn, sons, from 2 slave mothers. This indication is of an induced self-limitation in spiritual growth, just as that of the first son stage of Avram. Now, after advancing through 4 stages, or sons, the Jacob soul over the next 2 stages effects a slight pattern improvement symbolized by going back to his natural first wife for birth of the next sons. Now there are 10 stages, or sons, of progress, with yet only quite a nominal spiritual attainment so far. A rather major growth advancement occurs next. The addition of female-like qualities of gentleness, caring, and support enters into level 3. This is what Jacob's soul had long yearned, and is symbolized by birth of a single daughter rather than another son. A true spiritual love now enters into the few stages yet to follow in spiritual growth succession. This is symbolized by Jacob's next-born son in true love. The 11th son marries a princess. She bears 2 sons of royal blood, accepted into Jacob's family, as entry of 2 stages of higher spiritual degree. Finally, before birth of this last 12th son, Jacob has a dark night of the soul experience. There he wrestles with his own consciousness for award of his new name, Israel, meaning striving for divinity. The last son is then born, but Jacob consciousness has not yet attained release from level 3. The last son represents the coming of a Christ-like spiritual consciousness, but the next higher level is not yet attained. For after Jacob's wrestling and attaining of his new outlook name, he still limps. This amazing drama, played out in actual living life by highly developed volunteer souls, is a terse record of prime successive levels, with interlinking stages and spiritual evolvement towards scriptural eternal life. Such a reward is constantly available to each of us, even though we do continue to partake of certain forbidden fruit for which Scripture has cautioned. We will most surely die and know eternal life. Level 3 consciousness falls into just such a state through jealousy and animosity that can yet generate a condition of bondage out of its very striving. A very significant role is played out by the 11th and favorable son of Jacob level. This role, too, is played by a highly evolved volunteer soul. He comes with many spiritual capabilities, or a coat of many colors. Disliked by his brothers resulted in the 11th son being sold into Egyptian slavery. Later, the remaining level 3 sons, feeling spiritual thirst, go into the Egypt of plenty, there to receive them as a very one that they had cast out. The fate of early level 3 eventually becomes bondage. Spiritual versatility of stage 11 son raises a part of level 3 to higher status because of addition of the 2 grandsons of royal blood into the Jacob family. This then symbolizes an additional raising of Jacob consciousness and of level 3. By replacing 2 stages within level 3, this altered dozen stages, now containing elevating royal blood, become the 12 tribes of Israel, who are still the Israelites in their striving for divinity. It must be noted that the Israelites went into Egypt of their own free will, to satiate a spiritual thirst. They were not forcibly captured into bondage. It was of their own doing. This spiritual point is most significant, one that unfortunately Christianity and which other religions do not teach or even mention. Presentation in this drama of the 12 stages losing their progress in spiritual development over a 400-year period has a very basic import. In our current vernacular, meaning of the 400 years is about like back to square one or back to the beginning. Why should such retreat befall the 12 sons of Jacob? And what is its meaning in terms of spiritual growth? Growth progress through a given level has already been compared with progress through a grade school. If one fails to make the grade, one must do it over again. Jacob's limping consciousness must once again take it from the beginning. But this next time there is a royal blood injected into consciousness, plus now an inner guidance that is drawn from the water, and must yet mature. It is a new volunteer in this drama, playing the part of a spiritual guide, and is to be known as Moses. What can be the spiritual basis for new volunteers coming into the stage at this juncture? How did the 12 sons of Jacob, through their own doing, generate such a regressive consequence upon themselves? In order to find answer to these questions of how and why, some concepts that religion have given us should be re-examined. Answers reside in original Bible language, but do not come through into English translations. Moreover, most religions do not directly express or teach these specific spiritual principles. The simple answer is that what we think of as God somewhere outside of us is actually Spirit acting for better or for worse directly within each of us. Christ himself was the final volunteer in this drama. His participation was known 100 years ahead by the Essenes, who labeled him Teacher of Righteousness. He taught the higher essences of ancient Bible text. The volunteer souls rendered their drama in living historical life, wherein humanity seemed to advance spirituality to a third level of progress, but in doing so makes an immature blunder. It is then their very own creativity that forces them back to square one for redoing their lost adventure. Next, they travel a spiritual wilderness, this time with a guide who himself is then also maturing spiritually. Such a scenario is a cautioned realistic possibility, but not necessarily the only or primary one. Various experiential sequences that may occur in anyone's life are a fundamental purpose of spiritual growth. Advanced mystical teaching indicates 3 routes to spiritual attainment. These are through devotion, service, or intellect. Devotion is the simplest. If one is fully devoted to what one believes, it makes very little difference what the belief may be. It is the unshakable belief that guides one creatively. Christianity employs devotion primarily. This method might lose its effectiveness if one is intellectually oriented, because English Bible translations are only of a limited surface phase of original ancient text. If you become so devoted in your belief of what you have been intellectually programmed into accepting as your fundamental truth, that of itself, through your innate creative capability, can guide you spiritually just as a kind of Moses might do. What has been presented in words herein is primarily intellectual, but that Bible record rendered by a loving volunteer group of externalized souls was a unique service which can become transmutable to us into guidance for our spiritual life as well. A good God. A minister of a prominent Christian church was asked for his idea regarding the basic religious purpose for human souls being on this earth. He explained it carefully in this way. Goddard created a garden for the very first man on this earth to live in. The garden had all that needed for livelihood. The man was told not to eat the fruit of a specific tree in the garden. God was disobeyed. Therefore the man was expelled from the garden for disobeying God. To return into God's grace, each individual human must now redeem himself for the sin of disobedience. This, the minister claimed, was the real purpose for our being on earth. This purpose is redemption. This may be a reasonable evaluation from an English translation of the first part of our biblical Genesis. However, within the very same words written in the ancient biblical language, there is quite a different evaluation that is achievable. English Bible translations has existed for almost 400 years. The evaluation as given by the minister cited above might possibly be that old as well. It is not therefore too likely that minds so fully fertilized with such conceived ideas can at this stage be expected to grasp some distinctly alternative evaluation from these very same original biblical words. For the purpose of this story, you need not endeavor to modify your present opinion of the minister's version above. That to be given here is definitely verifiable, even though presented without proof. In original biblical language, term Adam, ADM, is translated man, but rather than an individual, it might more properly be mankind, as a class like the words fish or sheep. Class usage occurs only early in Genesis. Later it is translated as a name, Adam, of a person. Actual significance of word ADM is of an individual living being or class of living beings, having the potential for spiritual evolvement or growth. Its use as a name is a kind of analogy or parable expression. From the ancient Bible language, the above sense is taken as separate concepts of each alphabet letter meaning, then combined. Such unusual characteristic sets the ancient language as quite incredible. Word meanings often come out more like organized concepts or ideas rather than discrete words. It is this that makes an exact individual word-for-word translation extremely difficult and often quite impossible. The minister's idea above depicts word Adam as an individual male rather than a human class. Before the word occurs in Genesis, there is another word, Hadm, H-A-D-M-H, preceding it. It represents a forerunner of Adam, A-D-M. It is another kind of living creature like unto Adam, but without spiritual growth potential. It is also a class of creature, one that has to become the ADM class of being. It is the creature considered for creative changes in Genesis, which will give Adam the same image and likeness as the Creator. Note that there are two creatures indicated, one already in existence, another that is to be altered into becoming creative like unto the Creator. The alteration does not occur all at once. There are 4 stages to its completion. In the last stage, a new soul with creative potential is inseminated into Adam, ADM, to make it an advanced being with full capability for spiritual evolvement, a lengthy growth process. This was the original Immaculate Conception. Without a doubt, it cannot be overstressed that our entire Bible is primarily a spiritual work. As such, much of it, being spirit, is not seen, mainly as consisting of only printed words. One of the mystical books points out that there are actually several distinct levels of understanding in biblical writings. What has been translated to English is only an outer or surface level. This outer level is compared with the clothes, the garment a person may wear to adorn and protect. The body, the living body, is a more substantial part. Yet beyond it is a third level compared as the soul. For those who do attain comprehension of soul level, there may be fortunate to go further to a level indicated as the soul of the soul. Words create and creativity have been used a few times. Our outer level English translation clouds the significant essence of meaning of the word create. Biblical verb bara, B-A-R-A, translated to create, means in English to instantly make something from nothing. Biblical language meaning of create is a process of 4 distinct steps. Bara is only the second step. We, living human beings, have within us a capability to create, not merely artwork, designs, equipment, and such, but also to make our influence happenings and events in our own daily lives. This most significant meaning of what is the actual concept of a creative capability is clouded in Bible translation. It is an action of creation, one we can invoke from within ourselves, either intentionally or ignorantly, but it can be as effective either way. Religion tends to infer that such action comes only from outside of ourselves, rather than from within. Religion, in warming our hearts, assures us that God constantly watches over all of us from up on high. In doing so, we are told, an evaluation is constantly being made of whether we have been good or evil. An appraisal of that is then made, followed by a decision on its decree. Then a suitable reward or punishment is invoked on us. Religious terminology of good and evil seems to be a bit too severe for this story, so with your tolerance, an alternative of nice and nasty will be used instead. To constantly observe, evaluate, judge, and invoke a decision for all here on earth could turn out to be an immense time-consuming task even for a fast God. Since God can do most anything, let us consider that for just one individual, to observe, evaluate, judge, and evoke the decision, God could do it all in just 1/1,000,000 of a second. To do this function just once for each and every living human on this earth would then require about 2,000 years. Regardless of the degree of nicety or nastiness, quite a few folks might get away without being reviewed at all if they happen to live less than 2,000 years. God in his wisdom and infinite capability should of a certainty have been able to come up with some better system. And that is exactly what happened. We have been put on the honor system, but most of us here are not aware or even know of what that system is. The way the system works is that in each one of us lives the presence of divine creative potential. That is, we have within us the creative capability of the image and likeness of the Creator. If we are nice, then our inner feelings of that nicety will generate a corresponding niceness somewhere, sometime in our life. If we are nasty, the product of that nastiness will bloom somewhere, sometime in our lives, and we will do it all to ourselves. This is just what happened with the sons of Jacob by their nasty feelings of hatred and animosity toward their brother Joseph. It created for them and for the Jacob level years of Egyptian bondage. It is a significant example played out for us in the drama by the elevated volunteer souls. The divine seeding of creativity is already within us. We need only plant those seeds for them to grow anywhere we may wish to select. The immaculately conceived soul within mankind, or Adam, reacts to inner feelings, feelings of the heart. When inwardly we live in being serene and nice, we reap rewards in daily life. When we live in being fearful, angry, or nasty, we reap a punishing harvest. Back now to mankind, or ADM. Was expulsion out of the garden the product of an inward nasty reaction of disobedience, or an intentional, divinely stimulated means of teaching? Newly conceived mankind, Adam, was yet a babe, an immature being created for spiritual growth. As a fetus first resides in the womb for an initial development, so was he placed within special guardianship or garden for such a divine purpose. True, Adam may have been expelled just as a newborn infant is expelled from a womb, a normal, purposeful sequence to begin maturing in spiritual development on this earth amidst the prevalent nice and nasty. For progeny of ADM, rather than starting as sinners to earn divine grace by redemption, it may be more a matter of learning integration of the nice and nasty into a harmony through direct living experience. For this precise purpose is a tree of life planted in the midst of the garden. The tree is a master symbol of spiritual growth, cited in the Bible without specific explanation. Its outer branches are like nice and nasty. Its central trunk is the balance, the harmony between them. Before leaving the concept of good God, of Adam and the tree, and of the garden, it would seem quite appropriate here to make a blunt statement of basic spiritual principle involved therein. If you, dear reader, can accept that either a real, a symbolic, or a metaphorical God is meant by the Bible text, then you will agree that such concept must also represent a source of intelligence and of caring. Could you then accept that such an intelligent and caring source, after making a creation as a duplicate of its own capability, would then trick that creation into an act so as to expel that creation, while still immature from the dwelling space specifically made for that creation's welfare? Think it over, since you must also be intelligent to have a sense of reason. Can you recognize that there must be some concept well hidden under cover of such a story? Perhaps immature Adam was being stimulated to learn a most significant lesson in terms of the insemination of a tremendous and powerful capability he had just received. A capability, if used in one fashion, could bring eternal life to Adam. But if used in another fashion, it would make him surely to die. He might die and then return, die and then return, die and return, until he finally learned the lesson. Programming us into an inner feeling of always being an unfortunate, disobedient sinner has the possibility of invoking duplicate unfortunateness constantly into our lives. The Bible tells us that what we have leads to more abundance. And can that mean constant sinning? Human creativity is constantly available to work in accordance with the deep inner feelings of a person, whether it be nice or nasty. One may have a choice. Holy Moses. The Israelites entered into Egyptian bondage of their own creative action, a slavery that lasted 430 years. 400 indicates a return to do it over. Additional 30 is a stimulation to do, a repeat, and do it well. Now, in addition, to help make the repeat effective, 2 more volunteer souls have entered the drama to play parts for elevating the 12 stages to the status of tribes of Israel. Yet a 3rd volunteer is now to join the other actors in this drama, to play a role of inner guidance within consciousness. This latest entry is drawn from the water, meaning a soul with developing creative awareness. He is to be called Moses. In the biblical language, his name would be spelled M-S-H-H, Moishi, M-O-I-S-H-E. If letters are reversed, the word becomes Hashem, H-A-S-H-E-M, which is the identification of or a call for God. Moses lives 120 years in 3 periods of 40 years. The number 40 also has divine creativeness in its meaning. The 3 periods bear resemblance to the 3 levels of spiritual involvement already covered. Moses is to play a role as agent of God, which is constantly within each of us. He will seem to us as though on the outside, but will be for us on the inside, letters reversed, as the call for God, as our constantly present inner source for guidance. Moses is commissioned to go to Egypt and demand of Pharaoh, "Let my people go." He will make 12 such demands, mistakenly called plagues. The 12 demands which God counteracts have a significance like the 12 stages of level 3 that are to be done over again. The last demand, as death of the firstborn, becomes most significant, although its meaning is veiled. The reason demand number 12 becomes so effective requires a consideration of the human body and soul pattern. Back on page 11 was a discussion of people being of a body and a soul. Body is only material substance. We can see it, touch it with our fingers, and hear it as it speaks. But the soul is spirit. We cannot see it, touch it physically, or hear it audibly. We identify another human as his body, though he is intangible spirit. When dead, both life and spirit are gone, and only a body without life or spirit is left. We no longer think of this as the person. While alive, the body is the host, the living means to provide nutrition for the soul to grow and develop. The soul, the real being, lives on, and when grown to spiritual maturity may enjoy eternal life. The body, born of earthly material, has been in this earth world a long time. Soul is of spiritual world, born into a living earthly body. Body evolved first. Human spirit came to evolve later. Firstborn is the body. It has animal-type instincts of its own. Body is biblically called the beast. See the book of Revelations. It was the beast-like, nasty instincts of Jacob's sons that brought about creation of their bondage. It is the same within us. It also causes just as much spiritual dormancy in our own lives. We, too, can be in a bondage for over 400 count, then awake to it over. Death of the firstborn was the veiled meaning for a release from nasty, beast-like drives that naturally may come from body. It is such a release that breaks the spell of nastiness within and allows us to do it over and over again with distinct nicety. A mark of blood placed on doorways of Israelites for death to pass them by has another veiled meaning. Biblical word for blood in equivalent English is DM. This is what indicates an opening for creative change, a chance for a do-it-yourself release. Release and exodus of Israelites out of Egypt marks the level of stage 13. Bondage is finished and is preparation to stage 14 for the change of repetition. Stage 14 becomes a magnificent finale for the Jacob role in crossing the Red Sea to begin the trek through the wilderness for finding a promised land. The promised land is the recovery of that progress and spiritual growth wasted through negative creative action, which resulted in years of useless bondage. The recovery is to be a long trip, led by a spiritual guide from within the freed entourage. The guide is Moses, playing a role of maturing intuition within the conscience of mankind. The entourage includes the horde of instincts and habit patterns making up the part of the beast, an animal-like drives within all of us human beings. The trek through the wilderness repeats 14 stages for 3 levels as 42 separate encampments along the total journey. The wilderness travel with guidance by Moses ends at the Jordan River, beyond what is the Promised Land. Arrival at the Promised Land is not an end to our spiritual evolvement journey here on this earth, but it is an entrance to a much higher state and development of spiritual consciousness. Wilderness travel indicates the swing of distraught shifts within us, back and forth, between dominance by inner natures of animal to spiritual, or by their qualities of nasty to nice. Successive encampments demonstrate a series of such steps toward spiritual progression. It is somewhat analogous to growing pains during physical youthfulness. First stops along the wilderness road after crossing the Red Sea are places like Marah and Elim, having to do with waters or creative changes. This is the basic theme along the encampment sequence throughout 40 years of travel or growth. 40 also signifies water. The drama of wilderness voyage presents factors and adjustments within humankind during attainment of a somewhat higher spirituality. It is a gain over that of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, The lifeless bones of Jacob are taken on a trek by Moses for burial in the Promised Land. The Jacob part is finished. A story of over 603,000 Israelites starting suddenly on a 40-year trip through country and terrain they know not is a fabulous narrative, particularly since it is history interlaced with basic principles and problems affecting actual spiritual progress in all of humanity. This historical drama is produced and lived by advanced volunteer souls, re-entering earth life for the sole purpose of leaving a living record greater in magnitude than even that of pyramid monuments. Every encampment holds well-veiled spiritual pointers on the human growth process, with its pitfall and guidance. Only a few are here selected for review and disclosure. Of these is the stop at Sinai, that is fairly well known, and preceding that one the stop at Rephidim, that is not too well known. When the Israelites encamp at Rephidim, they have no water and complain of severe thirst. A lack of water indicates a decline in creative effort. The thirst is a spiritual one of lack and confidence with the decline. Meaning of Rephidim indicates an inner relaxation in what might be called letting down your guard. One in such a state is inwardly open to nasty inroads of self-protectiveness, conceit, vanity, and others. An inroad then does occur. In the story, it is given as an attack by the Amalek, which represents ideas that are mentally hidden from understanding. The creative effort is not gone. It is just stimulated to oppose advancement. When discomfort or distress is understood, then guidance is sought. Israelites complain to Moses in the story. Moses directs Joshua to take men and go fight Amalek. A battle ensues. Moses, with Aaron and Hur, go up on the hill to watch the battle. When Moses holds up his hand, Joshua prevails. When Moses' hand is down, Amalek prevails. But the hands of Moses grow tired. So Aaron then seats Moses on a stone to steady him. Aaron holds up one hand of Moses while Hur holds up the other. Joshua then wins the battle. You are probably now aware that there is something spiritually significant well hidden above. Aaron is the son of Moses. Hur, having married his daughter, is his son-in-law. Aaron represents the maleness in terms of spirituality. Hur represents the femaleness. Thus, the combination is a balance around spiritual guidance for growth represented by Moses. This is a very clever representation is of the spirituality elevating pathway in accordance with the symbol of the tree of life. Moses, seated on a stone, represents in a central pathway a solidity of union, in balance, reaching upward to provide limitless spiritual power. Stated another way, as we gain an ability to discern and to balance or develop a harmony between opposing inner tendencies, like forcefulness and preservation, or like the syndrome of fight or flight, the balance then yields the capability for harmonious progress. Bear in mind that this story is a parable. What may appear as characters in this narration are actors as personifications of our own divine capabilities within ourselves and of ourselves. Whether of troubles or blessings, rather than another doing it to you, you yourself are essentially the doer out of ingrained habit patterns or ignorance. Having then gained a degree of spiritual confidence, the drama now proceeds to another major scene. Next encampment to be considered is identified as Sinai. At Sinai, Moses goes up into the mountains to receive what has been called the law. In his absence, the Israelites become concerned at not having a leader, so pieces of gold are collected, melted down, then formed in the figure of a calf, a golden calf, as an idol of worship. A veiled biblical language meaning for calf indicates a recurring mental aggravation. Together with gold, it becomes spiritual aggravation. In our spiritual immaturity, we humans have an innate need to be led by outside leadership. In not having such, we tend to fabricate it. This is so in religious as well. It may be an idol, prophet, saint, or even a misinterpretation of who or what may be a god. Moses returns with the law. In biblical translation, it is called the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments has a greater harshness of meaning than the original biblical language intimates. The 10 items constitute at once both a moral code for external living and a list of spiritual principles for inner living. Spiritual evaluation of these principles have already appeared in print and need no further repetition. Religion, in its well-meaning intention, has provided improvements that can actually introduce spiritual hindrance. For instance, the ministers feeling all mankind must redeem itself for disobedience of Adam can creatively invoke additional burdens to bear. From a spiritual standpoint, no divine retribution is demanded of mankind for commandment, infraction, or other instructions. This was brought out by Christ himself in the interrogation by Pilate. This fact comes from a Lama translated Tibetan scroll in the monastery near Lhasa recorded in 1700 years ago. Christ, when asked about Mosaic laws, replied, "I say that you ignore their true meaning, for it is not retribution, but pardon that they teach. Their sense has been perverted." A living temple. Perhaps most significant of the 40-year wilderness wandering is the Tabernacle, with its embracing detail and spiritual significance within human inner being. That import is of a spirituality as an inborn part of all mankind. It is biblically presented in a kind of parable style of experience, which occur in trying to gain direct recognition within consciousness of the divinity that forms its true identity. Since that spirituality is right within us, we carry it inside wherever we go. So the narration presents it as something portable, as a tabernacle, as a living divine inner dwelling. By now you may perceive the Israelite wanderers as symbolically composing the 12 spiritual personality traits of mankind, which were indicated within the Jacob level. Yet that very divinity, the divine spark which exists within each of us, is not realizable until after we have progressed spiritually past the level of Jacob, and perhaps even much further. The drama indicates this tabernacle as having been first put together as a portable structure during travel in the wilderness. The significance of its symbolic presence within us is mainly not recognized until at this point in our growth. During encampment, the tabernacle is centered within a somewhat circular array of 12 separate campsites for the 12 Israelite tribes. In the center of this array is another 12 campsites arrayed for the priesthood. The tabernacle has a courtyard center within this priesthood array, and the tabernacle proper is then set within the courtyard. The symbolism indicates that in our spiritual growth we first dwell successfully as a part of each of the tribes. After completing the living transit, we can enter the priesthood area, and an assigned priest conducts us into this courtyard and attends us to our initial cleansing. It is then, if we are adequately advanced, that we may enter into the sanctuary area. The tabernacle encampment array. Encircling the tabernacle courtyard is a rectangular fence held by posts spaced 5 cubits apart. There are 20 posts on each long side, 10 at one end with an allowance for a gate space at the other end. Total space between the posts all the way around are 56. A symbolism associated with the fence represents the total time span of the world from Adam on. Taking a fence space is 125 years. Total world time span is 125 by 56, for an end-of-world time of 7,000 years. By mystical reckoning, a major spiritual change will occur throughout our world about 2015. At year 7,000, it would be our year 3,000, in which end of the world will signal the cessation of our present world as it is now. Within the tabernacle courtyard, between the fence gate and entrance to the sanctuary, is an altar and a laver for inner cleansing. Metal parts of both are a copper in which the color symbolizes animal nature with its red for lifeblood. The laver is a large water bowl with a highly polished exterior, so that one may contemplate on a reflection of himself. To enter the tabernacle sanctuary, one must pass the first veil at the entrance. The furnishings inside include a lampstand, a table for bread, and an altar. All metal parts are of pure gold. The solid gold lampstand is a menorah with 7 oil-burning lights commonly shown as all in a row, but Bible direction to Moses have quite a different order. It is a sacred symbol in Judaic mysticism. It has a circle of 6 lights plus 1 in the center. Alternate lights of the 6 arise on 2 arms out of different central shaft elevations. Viewing the lights from above to visualize each of the 2 3-light groups as forming a triangle. The 2 triangles of light generate an array like that of the Star of David, just as an Israeli flag, and the 2-arm positions symbolize the 2 stripes of blue on their flag. And can this be a coincidence? The 6 lights with a central one are symbolic of 6 zodiac planetary signs, with the sun above, as in ancient and proper astrological arrangements. Also 12 tribes and 12 constellations are related here as well. The bread table is to have 12 loaves arranged in 2 rows of 6. Through a translation error of Luther's German, the loaves became known as shewbread, as to display rather than the meaning of to behold inwardly. Each loaf is made of 2 strips of dough twisted together. Baking them fused them to symbolize a union of harmony between outer branches of a tree of life and of two inborn human drives of force and fear. Beyond bread table and menorah is an altar. Beyond that is an entry for the Holy of Holies, where again entrance requires crossing a veil. This veil is that indicated in the Synoptic Gospel at the crucifixion of Christ as the veil of the temple being rent. Spiritual significance for items in the Holy of Holies are not very well revealed by their English titles. As an aid toward their understanding, discussion of these will be delayed until exotic significance of a tabernacle symbology within all of us is reviewed. The symbolism of the tabernacle is so beautiful, yet so intricately involved that translations of words or evaluation of their individual symbolic meanings can hardly approach doing it justice. Even herein, the endeavor will be limited to hitting the high points, lest this book becomes too intricately engrossed. The story of the tabernacle is about each of us. It includes one on the outside, an animal-like nature that Revelation calls the beast, and on the inside, the potential of a god. It may well serve as a roadmap for the trip from the outer to the inner. Mankind's threefold nature, structured together with its progressing fourfold growth upward in this earth realm, generates a product of 12 as reflected in the tribes of Israel, enveloping a tabernacle campground. The lifetime trip begins at one of the 12 different varieties of initial soul character. Then, traveling in a circuitous route among other soul traits, it arrives in the east toward a rising sun of golden light, at an entry gate to the priestly encampment. Here, in the presence of a guiding priest of matching soul quality, one is ushered into a courtyard for an initial evaluation. Here one may remove his outer reddish garb, taking a sacred baptismal cleansing and an inner self-appraisal. But if results are not satisfactory, back to square one. First items at the entrance to the courtyard is an altar designated as sacrifice altar. Biblical word for altar has a meaning of self-releasing inner activity, a bit like inwardly directed effervescence or ferment. Biblical word for sacrifice employs exactly the same root, but indicating release of animal nature. To coin a new term, the word alteration would lend an appropriate spiritual significance. Biblical word for laver has a root meaning to dig around. Thus, an inner excavation for a release, our word lavatory reflects release of the undesirable. In the sanctuary, the bread arranged as 2 parallel rows of 6 has a correspondence with the arrival of sons and grandsons of Jacob. For each mother, her sons come in 2s, and for either sons of Jacob or the tribes of Israel, there were 6 2s or 12. 6 and 12 correspond also with 6 planetary signs of astrology, each with 2 constellation signs. Biblical word for bread is lechem, Lechem, or LCM. Letter L is a prepositional prefix meaning 4. Letter CM form the name of Noah's first son, Ham, who represents our animal nature that comes first. Thus, bread, lechem, is for the animal nature, as its staff of life, its nourishment, until an alteration. Controversy of King James Version of Exodus 25:30 may be solved by a proper English translation from, "Thou shalt set upon the table shewbread before me always," to what of more effective meaning without entering significant details of the specific original language definition. "You shall present the alteration within the animal nature as evermore turned toward me." Also specified to be included with the bread loaves is frankincense, whose spelling is identical with the sphere of the tree of life, signifying understanding. Menorah data already given needs only an addition of its title meaning. Its root carries meanings of light propagation, illumination, and enlightenment. Central shaft, for its proper form, having the 4 spherical enlargements, represents the central pillar of the tree of life, to which Christ referred to as the way or path of enlightenment. Last item within the sanctuary is another altar. This one is called incense altar, ostensibly for generating a fragrant aroma within the area. This altar has a gold overlay rather than copper. Its mystical meaning differs. Instead of just a releasing activity, the inference here is of an emanation, to which the gold overlay extends the emanation to one of elevated spiritual order. The word odor is used for emission of fragrance. The term odor is known as being derived from ancient Egyptian culture as having esoteric significance. To quote from Lebuch, it is a seed of non-objectifiable energy, a container of spirit substance for the fire of the seed, was called the odor. So this altar, rather than to release restraint, is to generate inner radiance, that is, feelings of spiritual enhancement, or to use a more popular expression, to attain the spiritual state of being turned on, as a consciousness alteration for high divine attainment. At this stage, the soul is ready to pierce the last veil, called the abyss, on the tree of life, and enter the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holy room has equal length, width, and height. It is a perfect cubicle. It contains but a single item, an assemblage of 3 components. These have English titles of Ark of Testimony, Mercy Seat, and a pair of cherubim. Ark of Testimony is a box of special wood measuring about 50 by 30 by 30 inches. The Mercy Seat is of pure gold cover for the box. The 2 cherubim are pure gold statuettes as replicas of angelic figures. They are atop the Mercy Seat, facing each other from each end, with wings outstretched and tips touching. The word ark only means chest or storage container, but biblical language meaning for Ark of Testimony is quite involved, but may simply state it as a containment of readily available elevated divine source potential within human outer beingness. The Ark of Testimony is a symbolic containment reference to the highest potential source of divine emanation in mankind. This refers to the area of the human skull, but also to the highest spiritual world. In biblical terminology, that called mercy seat is the single word parat, P-E-R-A-T, with a prefix meaning such as. Parat is one of the 4 rivers that flowed out of the Garden of Eden, the only one not stated as to where it flowed. The such as parat refers to the highest spiritual world, that which is closest to the divine source. It signifies an esoteric place or condition where divine fulfillment is possible. The so-called mercy seat, rather than signifying seat of intercession or propitiation or of forgiveness, is a seat of attainment, a seat of divine fulfillment, a seat of unification. Such fulfillment and unification of the soul is to be rewarded with a primal elevation for its return home, to the source from whence it came. Mankind, as Adam, came into this earth world symbolically from the Garden of Eden. Now in oneness, Yechida, Y-E-C-H-I-D-A, to return via a pathway of the tree of life preserved for him by the cherubim. These cherubim had protected this pathway with a sharp, fiery whirlwind that at this time is yet under cover of their outspread wings. A cherub, plural cherubim, is an angelic creation of specific mission. The word also indicates a unified structure of mind, body, and spirit. As indicative of position, it is the third world, the throne of God, and indicative of activity, it is also the chariot. One of the mystical books describes the Bible as having several simultaneous and distinct levels of understanding. It compares these with a person as first the outer level of writing, as the garment, the clothes being worn to cover and protect the body, which is the second level of understanding. There is still a third level, the soul, which is not seen but discernible from activity of the body. For those much more capable, even a 4th level may be discerned, which would be the soul of the soul. The Bible story of the tabernacle is indeed written in the language of the garment, with a series of disclosures that a body does exist and live within. The body is sometimes apparent, but more often it is disguised or even hidden. Thus there appears to be a parable within a parable where intellect alone may be inadequate to sound out the depth. The text is written and trust that you, dear reader, will discern that feeling body and also be fortunate enough to feel the pulse of its soul. As a parable, the tabernacle story relates a series of historical detail and events. As such, the garment may well be. Within that garment is more history about all of us. History past and history yet to be made. History regarding our wandering in obscure wilderness. Not about the traveling, but rather the experience that may be past and yet to be experienced. And constantly within seeming wanderings, there beats a rhythm of progress within a living soul. An apology for having returned to parable, metaphor, and analogy in relating to the above. Symbolism of the tabernacle story is so involved that in our habit patterns of relating all that we know as parts or associations of this physical world in which we presently live, that mental extension to a realm of spirit in which we do exist is not only difficult to attain, but about impossible to believe or imagine. When you feel your breathing and your heartbeat, or see your body in a mirror, you tend to identify that as you. But where is the spirit that you are told is really you? Your body, with its breathing and its pulse, is your physical home in this earth world. Your spirit is not physical. You may have sensed it in some vague area between your solar plexus and your chest. Did you ever get an extravagant present or a prize and feel a sudden elation rise upon within you? Did you ever feel you may have done something terribly wrong and feel a sinking sensation within you? If so, then you have felt what is really you. The Tabernacle story is about that part of you, not your physical body, but your real spirit counterpart, the portable temple within. It has been referred to as a roadmap, but is more of a prophecy of kinds of things you will experience inwardly during changes in growth, and will begin to comprehend differences within yourself and an appearance of your world around you. Symbolism of changing types of people, traits, in the closed circle within your campground reflect what you will experience within yourself. Arrival at Courtyard Gate may not be as evident to you as it was second time around to Israelites at their first Passover time. The glow and radiance of sanctuary symbolism that is followed by the golden living light in the Holy of Holies will be eternally indelible in your spirit memory. The Promised Land. Just as the Tabernacle story employed depth of symbolism, parable, and metaphor to veil an outer garment covering an import of tremendous spiritual significance, so too does the ancient terminology of a promised land cover the creatively sought by wilderness wanderers during their 40 years. The number 40 even hides the significance of the trip being inwardly performed. The Promised Land is just ahead of us right here within our very own souls. The land can be everywhere or anywhere on this planet Earth. The promise is of a happening in spiritual elevation to occur within our very being. The Promised Land is a metaphor. The land is for growing. The promise is for its flowering. The word promise is from a term which, rather than having our meaning of guarantee or of giving one's word, tends more toward the meaning of potential for occurrence, like a seed having the potential to grow but is as yet inhibited. The above metaphorical concept, though perhaps not fully evident from biblical writing, begins with the arrival by a highly developed soul volunteering to re-enter physical life on this earth. He is at first known as Avram in original biblical writing, and become Abram in English, and then later on as Abraham. Abraham is fathered or brought into life through Terah, T-E-R-A-H, who symbolizes a recycling out of a dormancy back to an activated consciousness. Terah is from the land of Uz, U-Z, meaning divine radiance. Abraham is thus symbolized as entering with high qualifications. He is told to leave his country, kindred, and father, and to go to a land which I will show thee. The land he has to be shown is most anywhere on this earth. The specific locale is to be Canaan, which signifies areas of undeveloped, materialistic being, such as in you and me. The concepts of Canaan, to be an actual promised land, were mainly concoctions by Bible historians, translators, and or storytellers. Rather than him being promised something, Avram or Abraham was being directed towards spiritual attainment. The land is actually designated in the Bible writing as earth. His directive is towards starting spiritual development here on this earth within materialistic or animal-like beings. More properly, the Promised Land might be used as a title for the continuous historical living drama lasting 2,000 years that started on this earth with Abraham, then summed up and completed by Christ. But we have left the story of our inner guide Moses still in the wilderness on his way with us toward an alteration of some kind at Cana. You'll recall that we had to redo the first transition through the 12 patterns now represented as the tribes of Israel. Thus we arrive at a gateway to what is represented as the Tabernacle courtyard. That same gateway is like the finishing of the wilderness travels with Moses, but that same kind of promise here is the Jordan River as a gateway into Canaan. Of the thousands who left Egypt to wander for 40 years through a wilderness, only 2 of the original were among those who arrived at the Jordan River for entry into Canaan. All others perished en route. Those arriving were the offsprings, outgrowth, developments, and spiritual upgrades of the initial personality traits that were in bondage for 430 years, and who grew in advancement during the trek. Crossing the Jordan River into Canaan represents a major step upward of spiritual level, which may occur in each of us. Just as the crossing of the Red Sea from Egypt Exodus, the Jordan River water was also held back to permit a second crossing of water on dry land. Jordan River crossing and Canaan entering are like numbers 13 and 14 already mentioned. These numbers represent an upgrading beyond the 12 personality traits to number 13. plus an elevation to the next higher spiritual level as number 14. From the Bible story, you may recall that 12 stones taken from the Jordan River were set on the Canaan side as a memorial. This representation is like that of the sacrifice altar at Tabernacle courtyard entry. The name given this memorial is Gilgal, which means a redoing, a repetition, but in addition it has the same meaning as our present words reincarnation or resurrection. There is doubt as to whether Gilgal was actually a place. Upon release of Moses from his mission, he is taken high on a mountain, or elevated, to see across to the so-called Promised Land. This bears an equivalence to that of the Christ upon his mission release of having the veil of the temple rent apart. When your own elevation is at hand, you too may be able to see across, to have such an awareness of its presence. After the crossing, Moses has been represented our inner intuitive guidance for the redoing, and is now superseded by a new higher guidance. The only two arrivals out of the total original people from Egypt were Joshua and Caleb. Joshua is our new spiritual guidance. The Hebraic name Caleb means dog. It is a representation of an inner companionship of our materialistic, animal-like nature. The name Joshua is very closely related with the Hebraic name of Christ. Significance of the name Joshua points to awareness and guidance, to divine spiritual direction. The given name of Christ points to unification through inner divine activity. In terms of symbolism of the tabernacle, our inner temple, the level of growth now corresponds with entrance into the sanctuary through the first veil. First mission for Joshua is to attack Jericho. He sees a man nearby who says he is the captain of divine hosts, and tells Joshua to remove his shoes for the ground whereupon he stands as holy. Full esoteric meaning is alluring involved, but its essence will be touched upon here without detailed analysis. The root word of Jericho has a literal meaning of odor, but in the mystical sense it signifies an emanation within an enclosure. Jericho was a walled city. It represents our inner spirituality that may be entrapped within walls of inflexible intellectual materialistic concepts, habit patterns, brainwashing. To advance within this new level just entered, this is the very first of her attack. These walls must come down. The captain of divine hosts is telling Joshua that he will have the backing of all divine capabilities if he inwardly respects the reverence of his holy mission. So also for us, as we enter higher spiritual levels for attainment, we may be creatively propelled by steady inner feelings of what referred to as the holiness. Our animal-like nature is forced to dwell this earth wherein is its necessary life force of sustainment. That very basic nature itself then in turn becomes its necessary life activity for our spiritual being. It is its land of promise, as its potential source and means for sustainment and spiritual growth. Primary nutrients of growth in our spiritual being is the living of life, of our animal-like nature. Thus it therefore becomes essential that we maintain for our animal-like nature an inward reverence, that it too may benefit creatively from its aliveness. For these reasons Christ taught that we should love our neighbor, which in original Bible language means our intimate associate, or animal-like nature. It is quite unfortunate that religions generally seem to have been designed mainly in terms of the fairly immature spirituality, without allowing extension for these elevated to experience the land of promise. Once a person is mentally programmed, or to use a stronger term, brainwashed, into the dogma of a specific religion, he may be faced with a future of bondage like unto that of the sons of Jacob. The sons brought their bondage unto themselves, but a religion that teaches kindergarten or first-grade religion can be more of an implementation of a very extended spiritual dormancy, one that may last a lifetime. If we earnestly seek religious freedom, the liberty to have available free access to the land of promise, then, as for Joshua, such a wall must come down. The efforts for Joshua were only well started in his overcoming the men of Jericho and taking possession of the city. He still had 7 more obstacles to overcome. These in the Bible narratives are described as the battles with the Amorites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hittites, Girgashites, Hivites, and Jebusites. When the work of Joshua was over and he neared his end of days, he called his Israelites together and spoke to them, directing that each should make his own choice as to the faith he preferred to follow. Even though the Israelites had their own priesthood, Joshua's words propose a state of religious freedom, a religious status to follow one's own conscience in liberty and freedom of choice. Ideally, democratic governments may be founded upon such a basis of liberty and freedom for all, but this should then be within personal bounds that each not encroach upon the liberty and freedom of others. In government, avoidance of such encroachment requires laws which of themselves must introduce limitations of both liberty and freedom. A bit further along, we will explore whether religion might be patterned after an ideal democracy, or if it should be a monarchy. But for now, let us consider the battle areas of Joshua during his guidance for making the land of promise equally available to all. The 7 major obstacles presented as battles for Joshua to overcome relate to Hebraic letter Zayin, Z-A-Y-I-N, which carries the numeric value of 7. Zayin may denote living activity of life, or what has also been called aliveness, the essential nutrient for spiritual growth. It is of extreme importance toward our spiritual growth process that these 7 basic obstacles are first to be subdued, then essentially eliminated from within our innermost being. Then a natural growth may continue to advance, else we may merely remain in another bondage. While the 7 obstacles are biblically presented as a series of battles for Joshua to vanquish, they are in reality something we must untrain from within ourselves. They are habit patterns of feeling and of thinking, of which we could be totally unaware. Yet with our inherent creativeness, they can automatically induce these so-called stumbling blocks to limit or impede spiritual growth. The 7 obstacles are indeed quite like military defenders that will fight to maintain their ground within us. But with spiritual guidance through a Christ-like Joshua, we can be made aware of their actions and gradually subdue them. For brevity herein, the meaning evaluations of the 7 inner obstacles are bypassed in favor of just a simplified, concise assessment. 1. Amorite. It represents predominance of sexual drive, lust. It has the same root as word said, S-A-I-D, of Genesis 1. In God said, to indicate a coming creative act. Note relationship to English word, amorous. Perizzite represents egotism, self-importance. The Canaanite represents hidden dominance of animal nature, foundational obscurity. Hittite represents fearfulness, timidity, consternation, part of the flight or flight syndrome. Girgashite represents a drawing within, hiding behind an imagined image, reluctance to expose self. Hivite represents beastiness, wickedness, the fight part of fight or flight syndrome. Jebusite represents contention, raising misgivings and complaints. The above obstacles are mainly habitual occurrences that generate inner sensations and feelings of which we can be continually and totally unaware. When such inner feelings occur at heart level, an inner creative invocation may be induced. This could be switched on automatically toward the inhibiting of further spiritual growth. Continuing now in progress with Joshua along a new level of wilderness travel, until the next volunteer soul enters the drama to usher in its finale, and to provide a symbolic summary of significant factors. The new such entry is the Christ. He becomes the culmination for the 2,000-year drama that may never be understood by those for whom it was performed. Unless there comes someone who learns to penetrate this living parable and is also fortunate enough to be able to penetrate some minds not too thoroughly brainwashed. There is such a potential Savior within each one of us who will arrive into Bethlehem, Bet Lechem, on the back of an animal for birth into your own personal world. You will recognize the presence when your mind and soul are no longer cluttered with surface layer translations and their derived concepts. Then you may find that the word Messiah in Old Testament Bible language actually means an elevated state within yourself. You need not wait in vain for its arrival. You can work on it right now while you yet have living life. Hail democracy. Back in the early days of Judaism, or Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, there was then no person as leader or supervising director. Whether for better or worse, people followed their own inner directing. Each could do his own thing. Individual spiritual following was being identified as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That God was disclosed to them only as El Shaddai, translated God Almighty, but meaning life power of sustenance. Not a God in the current religious sense, but rather power of the life force. Later, with the coming of Moses, a priesthood, and then Joshua, the literal Bible translation indicate a possible leader or guide. However, in the mystical sense, this indicates mainly a basic freedom toward following of one's own heart. Leadership was to be from inner spiritual development within, and for each individual. This is a kind of personal liberty for self-selection of one's spiritual direction. When Joshua, before his death, called the people of Israel together to declare to each make their own preferred choice of faith to follow, he did thus endorse a freedom of and liberty in religious choice. Personal freedom and liberty has for a long time been the hallmark of governmental democracy, but let us for the moment stretch this concept of personal freedom and liberty to spiritual freedom and liberty. Then let us think of this as religious democracy in specific terms of the individual. People have long been likened to sheep, and that they seem to demand to have a leader. It was during biblical times of last of the prophets that the Israelites insisted on having a king. Then about 1100 B.C., Saul was made the first king of their people. In so doing, a virtual religious democracy became a virtual religious monarchy. Gone was the personal freedom for religious concept selection. Now consider your own religion. Is it democratic-like, or is it monarchical type? Do you freely search out the present religious following, or was it acceptance of hand-me-down from parent or relative? Did it conform to your feelings of conscience, or were you told that you were to feel and believe? Have you been intellectually trained into that belief? There was no Christianity when Christ was alive. Was then Christ a Christian? Did you know that Christ taught a true esoteric Judaism based upon the Old Testament? If you are a Christian, do you follow the teachings of Christ or of Christianity? Do you know whether or not they are the same? At the time of Christ, some of the esoteric essence of ancient Judaism had been lost, and when Christianity became like a monarchy, it also changed. Lost is the true essence of which Christ taught at the time. Now is it lost again in our English Bible translation. The name Jesus is an excellent example. It has lost entirely the beautiful esoteric significance of the Hebraic name given him. The name Jesus is indeed a very sad corruption of a distinguishing given name. Perhaps corruption of the name symbolized what may have happened as well to the religious teaching. Christianity has now become quite a gigantic religion, having several hundred variations, both in practice and also in name. Its priesthood may be proud of its massive organizational structure. Its structure is a glorious religious monarchy, one that its adherents cannot hope to penetrate. All follow rules the monarchy decides to lay down for its adherents. Can religions be changed to become democracy-like? Actually, we do now have some democracy-like form, but it is subjugated within the monarchy. Let us reconsider a concept given back on page 22, that each and every one of us already has within ourselves the spiritual capability for generating reward or punishment in accordance with our inner feelings of nicety or nastiness. If we are continually impressed to feel that we are sinners, and to feel we must redeem ourselves, then our inherent creative capability in responding to such feelings can create for us sinful situations and redemptive needs. Here is a genuine product of spiritual democracy, and its work through freedom and liberty of feeling. It is almost impossible to teach spirituality through intellectual means. Spiritual involvement is a growth process that is attained mainly through experiencing. This too indicates a democratic-like attribute. That which one experiences towards spiritual growth is personal. It happens within the inner being of an individual. It may be stimulated by a unity of feeling in a congregation, but its experiencing is something individual, personal, and intimate within each soul. Our available creativity can be directed to assist in a process towards spiritual growth, but here again it may be better of an individual basis than in groups. It may be preferable for religion to teach us how to take positive advantage of our creative gift toward enhanced growth, rather than teach religious morals or negative perception for avoidance. Major stumbling blocks, stifling spiritual growth, come to us right from birth as innate instincts for propagation and protectiveness. Such stumbling blocks derive from the dependence in our physical body of our living animal nature for nourishment of aliveness, the activity of living. Propagation involves our most basic animal drive. Effect of an organism is far extensive in human beings. Violent life force discharging from its spinal end flows sharply upward, triggering the region for spiritual creativity. Bible translation that calls this region the heart lies in an abdominal area between the solar plexus and the lower part of the sternum. When occurring in deep mutual affection, pronounced spiritual elevation can result. An organism can be so ecstatically stimulating that a habit pattern may develop just for that effect alone. Then any possible spiritual gain is lost, and animal nature dominance can become a pattern of inhibiting spiritual growth. Such a democratic freedom of action freely chosen to maintain can denigrate other spiritual areas. Self-protection, another animal nature drive, also is a source of quite a variety of stumbling blocks in spiritual growth. These in terms of protection, both physical and also psychological. The first psychological type is in the story of Adam and Eve about covering their body nakedness with their fig leaves. The fig leaf coverings were aprons which cover only the front. The word fig is related to our word figment. A figment of imagination was thought by them to hide what they wished not to be detected by some penetrating eye. Based upon an inner concern of not qualifying with others' position or capability, we human tends to do or say things that we imagine will raise us up to an equal or superior level. The inner concern, a form of fear, can creatively reverse what we thought we were hiding. But even worse, a habit pattern in repetition so formed can limit spiritual growth. Should a helpful person point out to us such a habit pattern, our self-protection instinct automatically will rise to the defense, and an argument may ensue or we may run away. Fight or flight syndrome. The second Bible commandment indicates quite a similar stumbling block in cautioning not glorifying a graven image. Word graven means self-made. We humans tend to create our own imaginal qualities and capabilities about ourselves for presentation in subtle ways to others. Again, should such be pointed out, another fight or flight activity may develop. Another drive based on inner feelings of inadequacy is to make ourselves noticed by others. This takes a variety of expressions. Continuing activity of such can develop habit patterns of which may be fully oblivious. An inner feeling of being inadequate can creatively cause us to appear inadequate to others. Spiritual democracy is in us to teach advancement out of experiences gained from error habit patterns. Having such habitual patterns that limit spiritual growth is referred to in the Bible as being unclean. The Gospel of Matthew 12:45 indicates one with such uncleanliness may have 7 destructive demons. A so-called demon is just such a habit pattern for which Joshua had to fight 7 battles, and to bring down the walls of Jericho, the habitual containment. From a religious standpoint, we are often told to say a prayer. If you have a democracy like freedom, you may do it any way you choose. Remember, prayers are not answered. They are creatively produced by your own deep inner feeling during the prayer. Remember the statement in Matthew 25:29, also 13:12. For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away, even that which he hath. A simple request for help from God or for that which you do not have can bring you unanswered prayers. If you pray for something you want but feel you do not have it, your inner divine creativity will arrange for you to lose something you do have. If you feel sick and pray that you have no more of that sickness, you may become even more sick. But if in your prayer you can feel the enthusiasm of God having prepared that which you wish is already available, then you shall have it. Or if you are sick and can feel deep within that God has intervened and that deeply within you are really already well, then that too will be awaiting you. Your prayers need not even invoke God. The divine creativity is always within you right now. You need only get the feeling of your desire across in a positive fashion, somewhat like a vision, to obtain the desire. Spiritual creation can take place at once, but for it to manifest in a material world at a certain physical place may take some time. Remember these paraphrased lines of Habakkuk 2:3. Your vision has its own appointed hour. It ripens, it will flower. If it seems late, just wait, for it is sure and will not be late. Beastly dominance. Bible book titled Revelation refers to an animal nature as the beast. It further cites the beast as having a number 666. Mystical evaluation of 666 is the word stavar, S-T-A-V-A-R, which in the original biblical language can mean an inner state of non-awareness, or not having the capability of either knowing or understanding. Gaining capability to become aware or to comprehend dominance of the beast within us is designated in the book of Revelation as wisdom. You already know the essence of the beast concept from that related back on pages 26 and 27. Our Bible story tells of two types of living creatures. First, an existing physical type. Second, a growing upgrade of the first type, which has added to it a spiritual capability to create. A capability just like that of the Creator. We human beings are the upgraded type. The upgrade is spirit, not physical. The body part that is physical, we are calling animal nature, and the Revelation has called it the beast. The beast, as part of us, comes into this world from birth, equipped with its animal type instincts and drives. It is older than its upgraded spiritual part, which is yet immature and in a stage of growth. It is quite natural, then, for the beast to initially take over and try and run the show, and so it does, while striving to live and act as its basic animal nature. Whereas we are the spiritual human part, do not even recognize that we are not really in control. This is the essence of 666. When we do get to be aware, then and only then have we gained wisdom. The natural tendency of the beast to live and act as a basic animal gives rise to many stumbling blocks towards growth of our spiritual beingness. Hindrance by the beast is brought out in a biblical story long before the story of the volunteer drama already cited, and even before the time of Abraham. It is quite a short story with a cleverly interlinked impact. It is this of Noah, his 3 sons, and a grandson. It is the English version. The sons are Ham, Japheth, and Shem. The son of Ham, grandson of Noah, is Canaan. As the story goes, Noah is drunk on wine and lays supine and stark naked in his open tent. Son Ham sees his father, then goes to his 2 brothers and ridicules his father. Sons Japheth and Shem stand side by side with a large cloth over their shoulders and walk backward into the tent without looking at Noah to cover up the exposed nudity of their father. Significance of each character is gained from mystical meaning of the name. Ham is the animal nature, the beast. Japheth is the intellect. Shem is the spiritual. Canaan, a development or outgrowth of Ham, is an upgrade of the beast as with us during our growth. Somehow, when Noah is sober, he knows all that took place. He does not mention Ham at all, but predicates that Japheth will serve Shem, and that Canaan, as a servant of servants, will serve both Japheth and Shem. The veiled significance is that when animal nature becomes part of the team of mind and spirit, it will not only aid mind, but the two will both assist spirit in its development. Thus, the beast will not always dominate one's life. It too will develop to where it assists one's overall spiritual growth. Was it Mark Twain who said that it was a shame the way youth is wasted on young folk? The apparent waste may just be an exuberant activity that is the needed aliveness for spiritual nutrition and growth. We might even go further back than Noah to witness dominance of the beast. Cain, son of Adam, dominated over his twin brother Abel and exemplified the beast. In the living drama presented by volunteer souls, it too characterized progressive stages for the beast along with advancement in the growth of the spirit. Of the 2 sons of Abraham, Ishmael, the firstborn, represents the beast. Of the 2 sons of Isaac, Esau, the firstborn, represents the beast. The sons of Jacob arrived in 2s from their respective mothers, and of each such pair the firstborn represents a successive but small progressive change of the beast. In spite of this minor progressive improvement in the Jacob beast, its dominance gave rise to the cause of the bondage and the requirement for a repeat. Before we have a dark night of the soul like Jacob, beast dominance may be unrecognized and unopposed. Its nice or nasty hidden activity within us depends on qualities brought with it into our lifetime. This in turn depends as well on our past spiritual progress. We are here on this physical earth in training for a primary purpose of continuing spiritual advancement or growth. For this, the beast must be with us, for it is its living activity of life, its aliveness, that supplies nutrition for spirit to grow. In order to effect spiritual growth, we are faced with a paradox like that of Catch-22. If we pick up a dictionary to find out how to spell a word, we must first know how to spell it to find a dictionary. Spelling words is intellectual, but effecting a growth of spirit is spiritual, which first we must comprehend. Fortunately, our initial spiritual insemination, The seed already has its motivation for growth, and can succeed if not impeded by an immature beast. But we still should be able to comprehend that there may be beastly interference. Achievement over beastly dominance is attained as a soul approaches graduation in spiritual advancement, as the final player in the drama of volunteer souls. Christ exemplified this on the cross when the veil was rent before he died, and as he stated that he commended his spirit to the Father, Luke Gospel. The four Gospel depictions of Christ as the final drama player give a summary of major levels human may go through in attaining eternal life. The four major levels of the crosses are symbolized on the tree of life, and also in the Gospel order of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. The spelling of beast dominance is at the level symbolized by the Gospel of John. Our religious monarchy itself has its own unknown and unrecognized beast. It too came at birth of the religion, and has its own innate programming of self-protection of graven image and of others. The dominant beast of religion lies in the level of oversimplified teaching, at seemingly juvenile level, yet intellectual, inbred, brainwashed, so as to be intolerant of all their concepts. This generates true monarchy to program us into what we must believe. We must believe that his father condemned youthful Adam for the first misdeed, requiring that all of an ensuing world population must be redeemed for that very first immature act. Would your father treat you that way? Yet we are taught God is love itself. An unfortunate teaching is the misinterpretation of the significance of the term Son of God. Evaluation of the term Son in biblical language also has meanings of outgrowth of, development from, etc. All humanity are just such developments. Apostle Paul emphasized, "Ye are all gods." But for Christ it must be believed he was a special case as an only begotten, a direct descent of a divine family, rather than it being a metaphor to express him as being at an especially higher spiritual level than the rest of us. Another even more unfortunate misinterpretation of the Messiah concept. Over the past hundreds of years, there has existed a conviction by thousands that Christ is to return to resurrect and save all of us. Countless millions of people over hundreds and hundreds of years have expected, waited, and died waiting for the Messiah to come save them. In a monarchy, we wait for someone to do for us. In a democracy, we do for ourselves. Spirituality is a democracy. Even to be saved, whatever we may consider that to be, is to be done within ourselves. The word Messiah derives from a biblical term in which the book of Daniel. There it is given as Meshiach, M-E-S-H-I-A-C-H, which in its real mystical evaluation means an innermost acquirement of virtue, something self-accomplished, a condition or state of inner achievement. The essence of meaning is that a state of Christness is to arise within, through our own spiritual growth. It is to be a democratic achievement. To patiently wait for one to come to do it to us can only delay its achievement. Can it be that religion has thus delayed the very goal it may have endeavored us to reach? Not only do we as religious democrats strive to train the beast within us, to modify its basic nature into aiding our growth, but we must now also recognize that the very religion that is guiding our growth has its own beastly dominance and interference. Will your religion agree, or at least consider, such a possibility? Or will its inbred beast enter its own syndrome of fight or flight for its own self-protection? It may be that religion, as well as humanity, is in a process of spiritual growth, and perhaps as well in stalemate like a bondage of the sons of Jacob. Since spirituality is fundamentally democratic, we as its personal consider it a right by your own doing. This does not preclude a future return by one like Christ. It is of an interest that religion has been formulated by people, and may have similar kinds of growing pains as people do in maturing. This is an encouraging sign, even though a stalemate may have ensued. Now there is already an activity afoot to do it over, or at least to explore changes. Changes that may encourage and attract another highly developed soul to come back into this world again as a guide. Religion in its various forms has already done for humanity a tremendous amount of good. It satisfies an initial innate spiritual thirst that most people feel, yet know not specifically what it is. Of even far more good is keeping of our Bible alive in a sweeping international spread in spite of English translational limitations. Because of our religions, the Bible has become the greatest selling book in the world. The highly advanced souls who planned and initiated the extraordinary volunteer soul drama considered 2,000 years as a reasonable time span of successive lifetimes on this earth training center for the attainment of graduation-grade spirituality. Religions of merely a few hundred years should not really be expected to have yet attained their own eternal life qualifications. If we can believe that humans are on their way to making the grade, then we must also believe that religion shall do so too. The book of Revelations tells of a coming great world battle. Therein reference to Armageddon is directed to the original Bible language. This yields an esoteric import for Armageddon as an ultimate violent merging of life with spirit, of livingness with spirituality, of body with soul, and of good with evil. Symbolically, this can apply to our earth world, to all nations, to religions, and to individual humans. All are teamed up with their own kind of beast, plus an inner esoteric drive toward higher attainment. Yet this teamwork begins as more like being handcuffed. The idea of working team is used also in religion. Is there called the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, a threefold team? Mystical principles represent those of individual letters, which are called mother letters, as a representation of a divine threefold team. One of the mystical books that supports the Bible states about these mother letters as a great secret, wonderful and concealed. And from them are born fathers, from which everything is created. These latter fathers represent the divine reflection into our physical world, which is our training center to support spiritual growth. The so-called fathers are a team of four, the additional one pertaining to an aspect of this earthly training center. In the Bible, this team is given as another four individual letters. They differ from mother letters. A biblical term for the four-letter team is called a tetragrammaton, from the Greek meaning simply a four-letter structure. This four-letter Bible term is not a word. It is not intended to be translated as a word and is not to be enunciated as a word. It is an acronym, an ideogram. If translation is attempted, it is mainly as Lord and as God, and even sometimes as Jehovah or Yahweh. To indicate significance of the four-letter term, the letters will be considered as numerals in the order of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Letters 2 and 4 are the same, identical letter joined by letter 3. Letters 2 and 4 represent esoterically another team, of the inner unified with the outer. It is this tying together, this unifying, this join that forms a team. Inner acronym linking symbolize a bond, a marriage, a unifying of heaven with earth, soul with body, or spirit with matter. A spiritual progress progresses. Such a symbolic team becomes a harmonious oneness, both aspects working together to support each other. Religion in terms of spiritual growth should be that link-up as represented by the acronym letter 3 as to provide a highly harmonious unity, the sacred marriage of the inner with the outer, of the soul with the beast. This is an almost impossible task for religion, which task may improve a bit with age of a person. What is vitally needed for effecting that link, that marriage, that unity, must receive support from what itself is a living creature with a lifestyle of its own to protect and defend. More effective task improvements may come through association and observation of others who have already attained a measure of unification. The above observations are only words. Experience is assuredly far more effective. Religion does actually provide a means toward unity. It can develop in terms of generating a strong belief, a belief of the heart in God. Human creativity is invoked by what is deeply and sincerely believed. It matters not what it is that one believes. It is the belief itself that generates the pregnant seeds of creativity, seeds that shall bear a creative harvest. If you can believe that what you strongly desire has, as a result of that belief, already occurred in spirit, then it only requires that you patiently wait in that belief for your desire to manifest in this earthly world, where it requires small amount of time and space for when and where a harvest will come. The belief in God may in itself be most gratifying. Observe, too, what kind of seed you may be planting. As long as the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest shall not cease. Genesis 8:22. A new day. You may have often heard the ordinary expression of, "There's a new day coming." So there always is. Yet that new day might be a fresh morning, another 24-hour span, or a generalized period of days, months, or even years, as it is in the book of Genesis. The yogis tell of a cycle which they call a yuga, that is an earth cyclic period of 25,000 or 26,000 years. Whether it is actually 25 or 26 makes little difference to us right now, since the error amounts to a mere 0.004% or less. The Yuga cycle seems to arise from the wobble of the Earth's axis of rotation about its gravitational center. This wobble is about circular, its full cycle being the 25,000 or 26,000 year period. The past Yuga cycle changes was about when the Mu disaster occurred. Our Earth may be in a pregnancy again for just such another disaster's rebirth. A large asteroid has recently been detected in space as seemingly directed toward our Earth orbit. A near miss could change the number of days in the year as happened once before. Whether such a near miss was inside or outside the orbit would result in either an increase or decrease of the days per year. Our Earth might even return to its old 360-day year. But if indeed there is such an asteroid winging its way toward creating another catastrophe for us here on Mother Earth, its imminence is not known well enough to adequately raise our primary concerns. But there are definite signs within events presently on Earth to raise a primary concern of a coming episode, as possibly prophesied and currently in progress. The coming episode, which is presently building to a climax, is cleverly hidden as possible prophecy within the final book of the Bible. It is in Revelation 16:16 that makes specific reference to the Hebrew language, where its meaning may become decipherable. Key English word is Armageddon from the King James Bible, or apocalypse from the Septuagint of the early Greek translation. The word is implied by Strong is derived of two parts, 2022 and 4023, of har meaning mountains or hill, plus megiddo or megadon meaning rendezvous or assemblage. Thus is possibly a high-level gathering. In translation, this may even become considered as perhaps of troops or armies. We must bear in mind that our Bible is fundamentally a spiritual work of spiritual qualities, which may not be too evident amidst our materialistic surrounding. The word Armageddon has been indicated as being a worldwide battle, possibly since an earlier verse of Revelation 16:14 refers to a battle of the great day of God Almighty. However, the term translated as battle actually means an energetic activity, or an excessive stirring about. It might not be a battle of war or even toward one of all. The included reference to the Hebrew language for Armageddon is a potent indication that its veiled meaning may well lie covered therein. For Armageddon, its first Hebrew part, 2022, derived by Strong is equivalent English, HR or HRR, that means elevated conceptive thought. The latter part, 4023, in equivalent English is MGDVN, or MGGDVN. First letter M is a prepositional prefix meaning from or out of. The remainder is a union of two roots that would indicate a massive inner dissension. This Armageddon may be an engulfing personal revolt that is stimulated by inner conceptive or creative thought, perhaps like a violent union strike extended toward worldwide engulfment. In its elevated religious sense, Armageddon may be an engulfing spiritual cleansing of humanity, while in its material sense, an ethnic or genocidal cleansing, including famines, wars, and plagues such as the HIV. All these are now in progress toward correcting an overpopulation in this world of ours. Even Mother Nature is playing a part in this current cleansing, to reduce pollutants implanted by humans into the water, soil, and atmosphere. Our Earth, too, has now entered with wild weather patterns, floods, droughts, volcanic eruptions, and earthquakes. Mankind's structured financial world is feeling this overall cleansing as well, with business bankruptcies, bank failures, national debts, depressions, recessions, and monetary devaluations. Basically, it is still the human drive of greed and supremacy over others where this cleansing is now at work in all areas affecting mankind. For hundreds of years, soldiers have been the pawns with which all nations have played their checkered games of greed and aggrandizement. Now it includes finances where world politics have become involved. It may not be for us presently to know how all this will turn out. The political effort amongst such disarray between humans, workers, or nations is that of working out some kind of satisfactory compromise. Yet spiritual principles indicate that a compromise alone does not provide the needed cleansing of that which initially gave birth to the disarray. Compromise can serve effectively only as a temporary expedient, while a basic cleansing is being generated. In the Bible story of King Solomon, when two mothers claimed the same child, he offered a compromise of slicing the child in two, so that each claimant could have an equal share. It was not the compromise that worked. It was the cleansing of a greedy claimant. Within spiritual perception, a permanent solution can be attained by merging, a unification between the diversely cleaving forces. Again, first to be achieved, however, is a cleansing need within opposing forces. From such a unified human world born of an inwardly cleansed mankind will then brightly shine out for all a fresh and clear new day. On that glorious new day will the God within each of us, then unfettered by a beastly dominance, radiate forth as the image and likeness it was initially intended to be. It will be like a back to square one, but with an open heart of caring and tolerance for all others, to creatively employ our divine capability to create a new and more advantageous human society. End of chapter. End of book.